Welcome, everybody. I'm Beth Shero. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Shero Commerce. I'm excited that you've all joined us today for our LinkedIn Live talking about the future of e-commerce. A very fun and exciting topic. As you know, we are e-commerce experts helping our customers grow online with B2B and B2C markets. So I have a great guest that's going to be joining us from Vervaunt. We have Paul and Connor, who's going to be talking about their experience, about things they're seeing with their customers, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. They have some great examples they're going to be sharing. So excited to be here. And again, welcome everybody for hopping in. And if you have questions, please ask at any time. So we can dive in here and welcome our guests.
Great.
Hello, Paul and Connor from Vervaunt. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting us on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Can you do a little intro and tell everybody about yourselves and what Vervaunt does, just for the newcomers to the group?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start. My name's Paul. I co-founded Vervaunt business. We're half performance marketing, or actually way more than half now. But that's one side. And then Connor and I both work for the e-commerce consultancy side, which is focused on kind of independent strategy, auditing, replatforming, kind of BA work and delivery, and a few other things. And then I'm still pretty hands-on. I work very closely with clients, work mostly with premium fashion brands, etc. And then I asked Connor to join me when Beth and I were talking about this. He's my very enthusiastic protege. He runs a lot of cool projects with clients. So he's we're excited. And then Connor.
Yeah, I'm technology strategist at Vervaunt. I've been with the company, I think, almost 3.5 years. But like Paul mentioned, we work on like a lot of replatforming, redesign, strategic retainer, and roadmap like contracts. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Great.
But, yeah.
Awesome. And Paul and I have known each other for so long, but it's nice to finally meet you, Connor. I've heard a lot about you. And the thing that I love about Vervaunt is you are really, creating great services for your clients, and you are in an interesting space because you are doing e-com consultancy and you're working on, the advertising paid media side. So it's you kind of bridge two worlds very successfully and help your customers grow. So it's going to be great to get your input on what you see the trends being from your perspective. So let's dive in here. I know you put some examples together. Do you want to start with some trends that you're seeing, Connor?
Yes, for sure. So I put together like a bit of a list of...
Just quickly, sorry to interrupt already, but can you see our screen?
Yes.
Go, Connor.
Yeah, so we've put together a bit of a list of sort of 5 key themes that we frequently talk about with particularly our like retained clients. That being said, like a lot of these topics also bridge over into like replatforming and redesign projects, just as they're such like frequented topics at the moment, particularly just across like all of ecom. First and foremost, the customer account is a topic that I think, as you've probably seen, absolutely everybody is talking about. And that purely relates back to capturing things like first-party data, obviously with the deprecation of third-party cookies, which has of course been delayed, but I think it should still sort of be a front and center priority for a lot of brands that want to know a lot more about the customer, collect a lot more data, and be able to personalize a lot easier on site. I think the next point, loyalty, is very close to that customer account piece, and obviously it has to interface quite well with the account itself. But a topic we'll dive into a lot further as we get further into the deck. Native applications is a bit more of an interesting one, and a topic sort of more recently we've been working a lot closer on with the brands we work with.
I would say that it also ties into the first two as well, like that's the driver.
Can you clarify what you mean by native applications?
You've confused the wording. The applications is confusing, but carry on.
So this is more like your traditional mobile app.
Okay.
Application. But I think the way we see it is probably a little bit different to your more app, where commercial. Like a lot of the projects we're working on now is actually more about building an app that promotes like a strong brand experience.
Right.
That sort of bridges the gap between online and offline, and being able to sort of invite customers to stores and be entitled to like a more concierge service, which is in line with what Paul said on like the point of loyalty in that customer account.
And I think the thing that's interesting about this is it's obviously not new, and people have been building apps for a long time, but it's more that I think there was like a 2-3 year gap where it wasn't really on anyone's roadmap. But now, because of all of the privacy issues and people are obviously pushing retention really hard, I think apps have suddenly, most of our clients are talking about it. Half our clients are building native apps. So yeah, it's been a bit of a resurgence.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. It's I feel like so many things have changed, especially since like COVID, doing, more with less and trying to create that experience. So I can see how like creating those applications to foster that relationship would make a lot of sense for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Following that, the next point is more around content on site. So there's so many brands that we constantly reference, like On Running as an example, who just have such a strong sort of brand guideline, and all of their content they're rolling out on site, whether it's like a new collaboration or just like a standard product drop, it's just always so consistent and sets the bar so high. And again, a topic we'll touch on a lot more with an absolute ton of examples.
I think the main point with that one as well is, and Connor's got some great examples, and you talk about this day in, day out, but it's also like the percentage of total budget being invested in content, primarily like photography and lifestyle content, but also like art direction and creative generally. So I think that will come onto that as well.
Yeah. I think just finally on that point, it's also probably one of the biggest areas where we have a lot of crossover with like the performance marketing side of the business, and actually creating like really visually compelling top of the funnel pages that a customer can land on, like a Mammut or I'm trying to think of other brands who have a page like that, like an On Running also.
On's the best.
Where you can really tell the brand story, talk about the product, the quality, and get somebody really bought into the brand and product. But yeah, like I said, we'll get into those for sure.
Awesome. Well, and then you have the PDP. So why don't we dive into some examples? I know people get really excited with the visuals.
Yeah, no, let's do it.
Just get past that. Okay.
No, that's all good. So the customer account, like I mentioned, it's such a big focus for us right now. I think, as I said, so many brands have obviously started honing in on this as an area with cookies being deprecated. So I think for us in particular, thinking outside the box a little bit, because I think this area could potentially get quite saturated, where it almost gets to a point where every single brand is sort of forcing you to sign up and create an account.
It's almost at that point now.
It could become just quite inconvenient for a customer. So these examples we've referenced, I think, are really good at sort of funneling the customer into signing up and receiving benefits and sort of becoming part of like a loyalty program.
Right.
Salomon across the board, I think, are probably one of the most well-rounded examples out there.
They were also very early to this.
Yeah, exactly. They were doing this quite a while ago. And across the entire site, which I've included other examples, which I'll come to. But first and foremost, the pop-up that you see here with the S Plus benefits, when you land on the site as a first-time visitor, they have like a notification style pop-up. So there'll be like a number 1 on the little customer account icon. And then if you hover over that, it clearly outlines like the benefits of signing up. So you can check out, you can receive free delivery, which is obviously a big sort of selling point for a lot of people. Special rewards, which you can learn much more about. But I think just skipping ahead, because there's another example from Salomon, which I think probably ties it all together quite nicely. But another great example from fragrance brand Acqua di Parma, I really like that they sort of reference like a special free gift with your first purchase if you register an account, which I think again is just quite a nice different way to sort of get somebody into register in their account and becoming a sort of bigger part of the brand.
Totally.
One thing I was just going to add as well in terms of like the drivers, so you've got like the tracking side, but the other, I mean, and I think you've probably got examples. Have you got Jalen back in here? Yeah, so we'll come on to like some of the other data you can capture through this. But I think the other thing is that you're in a really good position to personalize the experience if you know that, essentially, if you know, or you can capture some of this data. I'll leave that because you're going to talk about it anyway.
Perfect. I think just following on from sort of what happens next, either once you do have the account or if you're sort of considering creating an account, I think Tommy Hilfiger are a really good example of actually positioning the benefits of signing up and creating an account quite well. I think often, like speaking to brands as well, it's quite hard to think of ways to differentiate against potentially like a competitor where sort of perks of being like a loyal customer can become quite samey. But I do think the way Tommy Hilfiger position their like perks that you're entitled to is quite nice in terms of having like a bit more on an events calendar where you might feel a bit more involved, where there's something potentially happening in the store close to you. But also other things like early access, member-only products, which we see a lot more frequently. But I do quite like the way Tommy do position this as a whole.
I think the other thing to add as well is that you're going to move on to loyalty, but you need, in almost all cases, you need an account to build loyalty. And I think this is, and also the other thing is our average client is like a premium or luxury brand. They don't necessarily want loyalty. And even if they do build a loyalty program, they don't want it to come across as a loyalty program. And I think this is like a really nice kind of foundational thing, like foundational best practice that kind of sets you up to then start building on top of it.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing with what Paul just said as well is like so many brands have probably already rolled out like a more typical loyalty program with points. And I think there's going to be a lot that somewhat have to like reverse engineer this and then start building out like a more fully fledged account area, which we'll get to in the Berg example Paul mentioned. So like at the moment, for any brands we're working with where it's a completely new thing, I think the priority is to nail the account, and then loyalty you sort of build in with that and around the account area.
And I think the double driver of this, like one is like you say, tracking side of that data you're capturing. So like when you come on to JD, is it next?
So this
Just
was
carry
Salomon.
on.
That's all good. So like I mentioned with Salomon, what is really nice, obviously this isn't a Shopify checkout, but if you do get to the checkout and you're not a registered or logged in customer, they position getting free shipping in the checkout really nicely, and you can just sign up all within that one screen without being deferred somewhere else on site. And I think that's just such a big sort of pull when you're already in the checkout, you see free shipping in red. And I would expect that probably converts quite well in terms of actually getting a customer to sign in and create their account. The Flamingo Estate example is probably a bit less conventional, as it's a productized membership with, I think, Inveterate. But generally, as an example, I would recommend just having a look at those guys. I think the landing page they have where they position the benefits of becoming like a paid member is really nice and sort of lends itself into that like loyalty experience anyways. And it's a really nice sort of example for positioning perks. But I think that's fine. On the point of data capture, which Paul spoke about, H&M have been doing this for quite a while, but I do like the way in which within their pop-up they position like the add more and get more CTA. So if you click and expand that accordion, you would then see like potentially opt-ins for like date of birth, gender, potentially product interests. I think their example probably isn't too built out and could be a bit better, but that's like something we've definitely honed in on our side, is actually finding a bit more about the customer. So yeah, that's a good example. And the Astrid and Miu example I referenced, whilst it doesn't actually capture any data, what it does do really well is within Shopify is you could be absolutely anywhere on the site and you can sign up through this modal without being distracted and pushed to the account page, which is sort of more like a typical experience in recent years.
Experience too.
Exactly. So there's solutions like Status where it's a more of like an integrated account where it lives within a modal and you can just sign up within a matter of seconds and you're logged in. But like a lot of brands.
Do you typically recommend that, you know, your customers kind of drive this sign up now because of the data issues, or like what percentage of people are already doing this? Like, you know, what's your stance on it? Like, is it something that you're like, you have to do this moving forward, or you're just like not going to have the information you need?
I think it's a best practice for I mean, the majority of the big brands are doing it. Like you go to Nike, you go to Adidas in particular. You know, as Connor pointed out, there's a proportion of their catalogs that you're not able to buy if you don't have an account, and it's all positioned as a membership. But I do think this is like the way the world's going. Both from a tracking and also retention perspective. So yeah, I would say it's a best practice, but you can do it in a more subtle way as well. Like Balenciaga is a nice example, which you found. Yeah, I would say it's a best practice, and the majority of brands that are gonna, have any level of repeat purchase probably should be thinking about it.
I mean, that's what I was going to say. There is definitely like those pockets of brands where it's probably not such a focus, like the Supremes of the world.
Right.
That's because they're experience driven.
Exactly.
Everything.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
So following that, the J. Lindeberg example is probably one of the strongest ones we've seen in recent months. Which do you want to talk about?
Well, I think in terms of like, this doesn't do it justice. So I think the main thing is like they push the account. So it's called Clubhouse. Similar benefits: 10% off your first order, free shipping, free returns, like early access to sale and new product, which is pretty standard. But it's the way that you go through the account build process, and then it immediately asks you for gender, interests, and they've got quite a broad catalog across different sports, and then your size profile. And like, so as a customer, I would go in, select men, select golf, fill in my sizing, and then certain aspects of that are surfaced on the front end, and and then all of that data is pushed to their CDP. From a marketing perspective, the data is hugely valuable, but as a customer as well, like they start to personalize with it as well. So yeah, I think this is the strategy, I guess, end to end, that we're trying to build across our customers. And yeah, self-portrait's probably the first that we've done, but there's a number of our other clients that are essentially trying to build an equivalent of this. And then I would land on the site, I would be logged in for a period of time, and I would land on the site. I go to a PDP, it would pre-highlight my size. I go to a PLP, it would pre-highlight the filter. And I think that's the experience that
that's it's not only does it make it easier, but you feel kind of special because they know what you need, right?
Yeah. And
really that experience. That's awesome.
Yeah, and like even the email comms as well, like you could do size level availability emails. Like so much you can do with the data, and the same applies to paid and any other marketing. But yeah, I think the value of that data is so high, and the best place to ask for it is when you're giving someone a benefit of building an account.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing for me is, I guess, in my opinion, like the most valuable part here is probably the sizing, because I think to some extent, like with the product type piece, you could sort of pigeonhole yourself where you're only target email for a specific category. But that being said, like with the sizing piece, I think it allows you to be so much more focused. So for example, like the recommended for you on the right-hand side, you could only potentially show products for that size that a customer wants to purchase.
Really nicely.
So it feels a lot less wasteful, where you're potentially showing a customer recommendations of a popular product that
the only thing that's interesting. So I'm not we won't argue on this.
Okay.
The interest piece, I do think it's really valuable, but I think if you allow someone to, or if you make it really easy and prominent, and someone can change their preferences, etc., or you can like adapt it dynamically. I think as like for J. Lindeberg, I would only ever buy golf stuff, and I do think and a lot of their customers would be like that.
I mean more like product type. So in terms of seasonality, like if you had somebody who only opted in for like winter wear jackets,
I think they're an exception.
I think it's a risk. But I think if it's more zoomed out, like you say, where it's more sort of more activity focused, I think that makes total sense.
Makes sense.
But that's all good. And then this is just like a sort of video of like the J. Lindeberg members only collection. So within the account area, they sometimes will on occasion have like a hero banner, which surfaces like some content around the like Clubhouse pre-access golf collection, like you see here. But within this PLP, if I'm a registered account member or holder, I can go and shop this PLP ahead of anybody else that doesn't have the account. Which is something we're seeing a lot more of. Like so many larger brands are doing this now, like the On Runnings of the world. Nudie obviously do it. A lot of like the cycling brands originally did a lot of this. I think like Rafa probably did it on Leco.
But they're a lot of them are quite loyalty focused, and there's a lot of like community driven stuff.
Yeah, I could see that being really useful if you do have a community or you're trying to grow the community for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really nice execution. And then the next one, so this is kind of a little bit different. just quickly, I did mention earlier about like the number one notification style pop up on the icon, on the account icon. So if you did hover that, you would see like the S Plus membership I mentioned earlier. Annoyingly, it wasn't there before. But this shoe finder here, this sort of goes back to the data point Paul was making earlier. So
I would make the point, I just made the point that it's unrelated to the account.
yeah, so I mean, this is exactly like an isolated experience from the account. But what is really interesting here is if you had a customer who potentially was signed in, as they sort of sequentially answer these questions, so they choose like trail running, and then they might choose like a specific color. All of these attributes, you could then store those sort of data points against the customer, push it to your CRM platform, and sort of a more engaging way of knowing what that customer is interested in, rather than maybe pushing somebody to the account area, which could quite easily get missed. I think something like a shoe finder would get a lot more engagement, but yeah, it's just a nice kind of alternative way to tackle collecting more about the customer.
Yeah, I think this is a much nicer way of doing it. Like you go to a beauty brand and you'll get pushed into a quiz, and it's, you know, fully isolated. They're all quite similar in terms of the UI, whereas this is like inline in the grid. It's all Ajax. Like you're just literally just passing data to the brand, but as a customer, it's a really nice experience as well. So I think it's a really nice way of doing it.
Exactly. And then these two examples, they're actually sort of quite similar in what they're showing. Bespoke and Eaton, who specialize in like shirts and more formal wear, they actually collect data from the customer in sort of like a size finder format. So you would input like your
It's basically the same
chest size, like height, weight. Exactly. But what they do here, which is quite different to J. Lindeberg, is within all of their PLPs, you can then within one click filter by your exact size. If you're signed in, they will remember this obviously at all times. Whereas if you're not signed in, it would just be like a browser cookie, which would eventually expire.
Right.
And having all of this data, it means these PLPs are already sort of pre-filtered and tailored to you. So you're not sort of forcing somebody to end up scrolling, clicking onto a PDP to find out actually waist 31 and leg 31 isn't available in that product. So it's just like a really nice sort of means of streamlining. But yeah, both of these guys execute it really well. And just another nice example to share. I can skip this one, but loyalty we spoke about. So I think like the perks piece is quite interesting. I will go back, but like a particular topic we speak about is how exactly to sort of broach loyalty and standing out a little bit from like competitors.
And again, a lot of this comes down to the fact that we work with brands that are very protective over a lot of their kind of positioning and everything else. So they would never want to do a points-based program. But the trap that I often fall into is I talk about this stuff as if it's like the optimal way of doing it, but it's more the types of brands we work with. So the points-based stuff works really well. It's just that we're used to working with brands like On.
Yeah, I feel like so it can vary quite dramatically depending on what the customer needs are, right? To your point. For sure.
And I think what you're actually talking about, all of this is kind of like, it's like a Venn diagram of loyalty and like CRM, and it kind of sits in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, carry on.
So like the Kif example, which I'm sure you guys have already seen and so many people were talking about, and it's something I'm going to reference a little further in. But I think like Paul mentioned, and I did also with the brands we're speaking to, I think there's more sort of attention being put towards building out like a more bespoke loyalty experience. So less typical where it's just like follow us on Instagram and receive X number of points. And it's more like what Kif have executed so well with visit the store and you'll receive like X amount of points.
And it's also the fact that the benefits are not monetary. They're not even a service based. They're more like money can't buy things.
Yeah.
Right.
All built around experience more so. But like all of Kif's perks, of which I'm going to come on to, are really interesting. But what I think, like the point I mentioned about visiting in store and being rewarded for it, I think it does sort of bridge that gap between online and offline really well. Kif, their loyalty program is deployed in a native app, but you can quite easily just do this within a website as well. But I do think it's a good way to sort of drive foot traffic to the stores. And then exclusivity proposition, I think we touched on a little bit already. But like the on running example where if you're a sort of lower tier member, you can then sign in and shop very exclusive products for you. Nudie, we also mentioned, but again, if you sign up and create an account, you can access a members only product. Where loyalty comes into this is a bit different. So like Kif, as an example, they have, I think, 3 loyalty tiers. And for each of those tiers, they have a specific colorway assigned. So you will have exclusive products based on the previous spend and what tier you sit under, basically.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of like builds on your like members only product and actually makes it a lot more exclusive.
Yeah, the
so
thing
like
with
you
Kif,
wanted to buy
there's
something.
a pair of trainers that I really want, but it's like quite a high tier within the loyalty program. So I would need to spend like, I think it's like £1,500 or something, or however much in dollars, to get these products. And it is that there is a level of like, yeah, I think that would actually drive retention in itself just to get people into the right tier.
Yeah, exactly. And then following that, just to go back to Salomon once more, and I mentioned sort of bridging online and offline. So something Salomon do, which is really nice, is they have like a members card, and you can just add this to like your Google or Apple wallets. And if you go in store, you can scan your card, and the in-store team can obviously see a lot more about you as a customer. So like previous purchase history as an example, or potentially like lifetime spend. But I think it's a good way to identify the customer, and it's something we've been looking at a lot, and there's quite a few solutions out there, like Novel being one.
I was going to say, like, I think as a general thing, like I think because there's a few like people building out like the blockchain solutions for this stuff, but I think the Apple Wallet, taking Apple as the main example, but I think there's something really cool about having a pass in your Apple Wallet, and I think right now it's like there's a really good, and also there's the other thing that everyone uses their Apple Wallet every day, and you've got presence there. And I think it's like early adoption time at the moment. And Connor's rolling this out with a couple of our clients at the minute. And I personally think, yeah, it's just a really cool thing to be doing from an engagement perspective. Obviously, there's benefits across the multi-channel side, and it's a nice way to like get someone back to the site, etc. But yeah, I do think it's a really nice little mechanism.
Very interesting.
I was just going to say the other really nice thing you can do with a lot of solutions like this is you can have like geo ring fence, like targeted notifications. So like if I had this pass in my wallet, it's sort of no different to like if you're in the airport and you have a like boarding pass on your phone, you would receive notifications. So like if I go nearby a Salomon store, I could then receive a notification if I'm in like a certain mile radius of the store. So I think it's quite a nice sort of more subtle reminder.
Yeah, totally.
This one is a little bit different and probably somewhat off-piste, but it's like an in-store appointment booking service. And I think like quite often these like experiences can send you down a bit of a rabbit hole where you're taken to like a completely different page. But I do like the way these guys allow you to just navigate the entire appointment booking process through a modal. But the point I wanted to get out with this example is it builds a bit more of like a concierge feel to the experience where you go in store and like the team are going to like look after the customer, and you can sort of specify your requirements when you arrive. And again, it's something like the brands we're working with are thinking about, especially the more premium brands. And again, just driving traffic or foot traffic to the store. Do you have anything to add on that one?
No, I don't think so.
Perfect.
How many slides?
And then
I do think you're going quite slowly.
We've got 10 more. We have time. And then this is a random example, so I'll be very quick, but this is something we worked on with Fairfax and Favor and several other brands, but it's local inventory ads with Google. So if you did like search for the brand within a certain area, you can then feed in your like product catalog into Google Shopping. This service is actually free of charge. It's called local inventory ads, but it's a nice way to get your product sort of front and center.
I saw some adoption about this getting used more often as well. I saw some data around this getting used more often recently as well.
Yeah,
it's a nice way to see what is available in store, because like often somebody might go in store and then end up being quite disappointed.
It's interesting that you've highlighted this, because this is very new to the UK, but when I've been in the US, I think it's bigger there, and I think you have products even like map listings and stuff like that over there. But yeah, interesting.
And then next was native applications, which we've sort of touched on throughout the deck. Kif I've referenced, which sort of bridges across all three of those topics anyways. And it's a little bit zoomed out, so you might struggle to see it. But like I mentioned, they have absolutely tons of perks. I think the one I wanted to highlight was they basically will offer a customer double the points if you purchase Kif's own products, because Kif also sell like brands like New Balance and like various others. So rewarding the customer twice as much for purchasing Kif's own products is obviously better for the business. And I think it's really quite a nice feature for like a multi-brand retailer as such.
Yeah, it's smart.
Yeah. I think that's fine. And then native apps, like I've mentioned, we've looked at quite a lot. The big focus for us is actually making it feel like more of a different, compelling experience from what you would get on like a mobile site, just so there's like clear and obvious value there. This app example is Goat, which is really nice. And it feels a bit more personal, a bit more engaging than what you would typically get on the website. And I think they just have a lot more flex in terms of what they can build out within the app versus their like ecom platform.
And I guess the app thing's interesting. We're here, this is more focused on like the UI, but I think overall, like the reason for the resurgence of apps is one, because consumers are used to the experience harder, but obviously the main incremental benefit is the push notifications. And a lot of our clients that have introduced native apps, and they're not all commerce focused, but when it comes to the commerce side, have found that there is incremental benefit primarily because of the push notifications. And it's just an effective channel for like bringing customers back into an experience rather than sending an email and sending someone to a website within a browser. So I think from a retention standpoint, and it is also a great way to capture more data as well within those experiences. So yeah, I think we're definitely seeing we're actually seeing a lot more vendors pop up as well that are like building different frameworks for apps across the different platforms and everything. But yeah, I think this is an area that really excites us with some of the stuff our clients are doing.
It's also such I think a less invasive way of getting that customer to sign up also, because like typically with pretty much any app you download now, you're expected to sign up, and then once you're logged in forever, right? So like this example, I believe actually you can start shopping as a guest, but like some of the apps I've seen more recently, you are forced into signing up.
Yeah.
And it's quite a nice way to sort of push someone through an experience where you might answer a couple of questions, build out a bit more of a personalized experience. I'm not sure if they're in this deck. Actually, they are. So Gucci have like a more sort of bespoke for you page. So the homepage every time you go on the app will constantly evolve based on what's available and what your preferences are, which is where the real value is, I think. And then next was Louis Vuitton, which this was just more about the like concierge piece and the customer account as a whole. So being able to access like client services quite easily through the app, being able to book appointments and go in store. And it just feels like a very sort of robust, well-rounded experience. But just another nice example to highlight. So following on from apps, content is such a big area we're speaking about. So as I mentioned, sort of building those more like visually compelling experiences for like top of the funnel, like paid advertising traffic as an example. Also for like net new customers, just building a bit more like awareness around the brand and context and sort of building trust with that customer. And then the final point I've added is digital product passport and transparency, which is, I don't think it's sort of at its like fullest potential yet, but like so many brands we're seeing now are talking a lot more about how products are sourced, are they sustainable, just because the customer is so much more socially conscious. So brands like Asket obviously stand out in that field. Nudie as well.
I think this is broader than content. It's more like, I think just because the world's more competitive and you have to spend more money to get a new customer onto your site, I think more people are just investing in trying to sell the brand and build like an experience and, investing more in storytelling and kind of building something that someone can buy into rather than just having a bottom of funnel transactional experience. Content's definitely the biggest thing with it.
So this
Hey Connor, we have a question. What new technologies do you see having a significant impact in performance marketing in coming years? How should businesses stay ahead of these changes?
That is a very broad question. Yeah, so I mean, I think there's probably loads. I mean, one thing I would say up front is that neither Connor and I are performance marketing specialists, but obviously Vervaunt is performance marketing focused. So I think, the big trends we see in that world, so one would be content, one would be measurement outside of the obvious kind of AI and machine learning stuff. But yeah, I think measurement and attribution is like a huge investment area. Creative, both in the ad network and on site, is a massive investment area. And I think any technology that enables you to build more creative, better understand how creative is performing, build better landing pages, I think would be the biggest ones. And then on the measurement and attribution side, I think, some of the attribution tools that are being commoditized and coming down in terms of costs and things. I think the barriers to entry in that world have come down loads. They'd probably be the top two categories.
I mean, I was just going to say AI, probably more recently just experimenting with different platforms where you can actually create content. I think it's at probably some point going to level the playing field a lot more, where it's a bit more democratized and you can so easily create content.
Everything, right?
Everything I just said will also be heavily impacted by AI.
But everybody saw the video of the AI, I think it was a Porsche driving through the mountains. Yeah. So if you can create content like that already, I think it's pretty limitless. But yes,
we'll try not to talk about AI too much.
Yeah,
that could be a whole nother conversation.
Exactly, next time. So yeah, this example is just from On Running, but it again just does a really good job of sort of highlighting specific product technology. So tells you more about the Cloudmaster shoe as a whole, or Cloud Monster, sorry. But
I think just going back to On, I think they're these guys are subtly the new poster child for growth, and their revenue is rumored to be well in the billions online and obviously business. And they're, for the last 2 or 3 years, you can just see how their site has gone from being a transactional experience to a brand experience, and they've clearly invested millions of pounds in the lifestyle content they've produced, photography across the board. And I think this, the way that they introduce product to a new customer is how I think a lot of brands should be. And it's way more emotional, and there's a lot more you can buy into as soon as you touch the brand.
The other thing they also have really nailed down is the whole community piece. It's Represent, who we work with, also very similar. So they will frequently have running clubs in certain cities where followers of the brand will show up in their hundreds or thousands even. And it just brings people together, and they can talk about the products. They're all sort of wearing the same brand together, and it's really nice. But On Running, they just have such a strong experience built around brand ambassadors who are Olympians and athletes. So it's really cool. And then Nike, you obviously love this example. So
I think it's the same principle. It's only a good example because it used to be so stripped back, and we've always used this as an example of a hyper usable mobile site, whereas now they've gradually gone back and retroactively added all of this type of branded editorial content. So this is the Dunk range, and all of the Dunk products have this storytelling around the history of the Dunk, and they've got this video, and then they've done it across a huge proportion of their product now. But I think because the problem you got with this is when we're going and telling the client to invest in this, it's quite hard to have any meaningful data that says here's your impact. But when you've got brands like Nike investing, it helps to justify it.
Awesome. So we're almost out of time, Connor. I don't know if you want to.
We knew this would happen.
We'll do a quick run.
This is every client call we ever do.
I mean, I love it though. I feel like we could have taken each topic and just had a conversation about it. So lots of knowledge shared for sure.
We could definitely go all day with the examples.
We should have done one of this. That would have helped as well.
But yeah, just on the final topic I mentioned before was just sort of honing in on the PDP a bit. So obviously social shopping is so enormous. So customers being pushed directly to the PDP from platforms like Instagram, TikTok. So I think, and there's members of our paid team who are looking into this a lot more and releasing vlogs quite soon on sort of the value of the PDP. But I think it's just absolutely essential getting this right. So like on Running, they have so much solid content, not only about the product, but the brand within a PDP. Salomon's example, where you can also build like an entire look within a single, which is excellent. And it's a bit more descriptive about the product. This is from quite a niche brand who sells smart swimming goggles called Form, but I do really like just like the use of content on the site with like really engaging videos and also a bit more context in the form of like a subtitle under the videos, but it just feels like a really clean and cohesive experience. Next was Rev Official, who I believe are no longer around, but luckily I had a screenshot of it.
Clearly the PDP wasn't effective enough.
It's a good test.
Yeah.
But yeah, this styled with block, again, just having everything within the single fold. Because I think the most important thing here that I've mentioned before is like if I landed on this product, which is obviously sold out and out of stock, something else on this page might catch my interest, like potentially the boot she's wearing. Not for me personally.
It's like,
but it's a good way to sort of cross-sell a completely different product if you do end up somehow being on an out-of-stock product.
So I think this is a very different type of example because I think one is desktop, but also it's more the fact that it's just the direction of that page which is strong. But yeah, carry on. You need to go fast.
And then again, quite similar to the on-running example, but a good way to sort of, I guess, customize a product that is actually just a different colorway as a whole. So Baltic watches just basically tailor the page to that exact product color, and I just think it feels like a bit more of a visually striking experience. Blunt umbrellas, I highly recommend having a look at. This screenshot probably doesn't do it justice, but it's a really great site.
Doesn't do it justice.
And then this final example is actually quite random, but I do like that this brand, whose name I cannot remember annoyingly, they just include 2 pairs of insoles. So if you buy a product, and I really think this is something I'd like to see a lot more of with other like footwear brands, is they include 2 insoles. So if you're buying a product and it's either too big or too small, you can swap those insoles out, and I imagine it probably significantly helps returns. Exactly, and I think it's
wow,
use those insoles. So yeah, something I hope to see a lot more of. But I believe that's everything.
Wow, so many great examples. Really appreciate you sharing all of that.
Of course.
So yeah, wow, so much to digest. I mean, like, I feel like we could sit here and study these and really learn a lot. I hope everybody that joined today were, got some good takeaways that they can maybe go implement or be inspired by. Any final remarks that you want to add or recommendations, Paul and Connor, before we wrap up today?
Don't think so. Connor started doing a lot more blog posts and stuff like that as well. He's got more examples than anyone would ever want or need. So definitely have a look at those.
Inventory ad setup if you wanted to, but yeah, it's a good guideline to get up and running if you'd like to.
Yeah, if you have any blog posts you want to share, we can link them up. That'd be great, and love to have you another time. We can dive into AI maybe.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks for
having us on. Cheers, Beth.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then just to wrap up today, we'll be at the New York eCommerce Summit on June 27th. I'll be talking about the future of e-com with a panel of specialists. So hope to see you all there. If you're in the New York area, please feel free to join us. And that's a wrap for today. Really appreciate your time. I'm Beth Shero. Always be learning.